Hello and welcome once again. Here to talk about your comments and discuss some of the questions you've sent in, which I appreciate very much, so thank you for those. Anumodana. It is now 20 years since the devastating tsunami in Asia, and specifically here in Sri Lanka, on this particular coastline. It was very badly affected. A huge number of fatalities, but many families in this particular area affected by such a natural disaster. 20 years ago now, seems a long time, but in the minds of those directly affected, still living, very much present. And the railway line, the train you hear passing in the background here sometimes, and the ocean, the waves you might hear in the background and see on some of these videos, is just 10 kilometers from the worst hit, one of the worst hit areas of that tsunami, where there was the terrible train disaster as a result of the tsunami on Boxing Day 2004. You will have probably heard of this, and here it's very evident still in those parts. You can still see some of the damage, but of course in people's minds it's there. Those who have lost loved ones. It is a Buddhist country, so it is very much reflected upon continuously throughout daily lives, us as Buddhists, but in Buddhist cultures, that we will be parted from those we love as they will be parted from us. We reflect on aging, sickness and death, impermanence, anicca, dukkha, suffering, and of course anatta, not self, and that aspect of that we are not in control either of this physical body or this thinking brain or the conditions externally that affect that. So on this first comment, actually this is a question I received a little while ago. Just for the writer, I'll read the first part because I have already answered this in full in the last video called What is Wisdom, I think, the video yesterday. I talked about these subjects, so I'll just get those a mention now. You said that citta, the mind, is unconditioned, but the Buddha said that only nibbana is unconditioned. And then you go on to explain from the Pali Canon, the sutta in reference to the khandhas, SN 2248, and you explain that about the aggregates. Where did you read or learn that citta is outside the 5 aggregates and that it is unconditioned? So, as I explained in length yesterday, in the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and I learned from Thai forest masters in my training, listening to their Dharma talks and living with them in both Thailand and back in England, and through my own practice. Now the Buddha said, you don't have to go to the ends of the earth to find the answers, or to the ends of the universe, traveling here and there, seeking out teachers all over the place. You sit and you practice, and you find within this fathom-length body, this bag of skin and bones and horrible things, all of the answers are there to be seen by the wise, reflected upon. So my understanding of citta, being outside of the 5 aggregates, comes from experience. Then you go on to say, oh, that's it, that's what you said. So hopefully I've explained that in more detail in yesterday's talk for you. And then the other question similarly is, do Buddhists believe that karma is a thing that literally means your actions affect the future, your future life? Karma just means actions, as I explained, and I have explained actually in many talks, many videos, over and over again. It's actions of body, speech and mind, and those actions of body, speech and mind have results. So the answer to your question is yes, and again explained in detail, and its relation to rebirth, which you go on to then say, is it essential that one believes in rebirth? And you do talk about this idea of rebirth within the current life, moment to moment, at the exclusion of rebirth after this current life. But if you fully appreciate and understand from Paccittiya Samuppada, the 12 links of dependent origination, that functionality of moment to moment rebirth, you'll see that regardless of this physical body and thinking brain's existence, when this dies, that continues. The very nature of teacher, of Chitta, distracted by the chipmunk. So I always just feed them just before I talk, so they get extra loud. It's not on purpose. Yeah, again, I refer you to the most recent video, or the video yesterday. If you haven't already seen that, please watch. I do explain how those two things relate. Okay, so now up to date now with the comments and the questions, I hope. Can you speak on how to overcome sleepiness whilst meditating? Or does it happen naturally when one progresses on the path? Yes, naturally you'll become less tired, prone to the third of the 5 hindrances, tiredness. It's usually called sloth and torpor, but who understands what that means these days? Really, I call it laziness, or lack of, or lethargy more specifically. Just that, I can't be bothered, and you just doze off. It's easier to fall asleep. Yeah, naturally with the practice, as you have more benefit from your meditation, it becomes more enjoyable. You'll become less inclined to have this lethargy, be tired, fall asleep. But how to overcome it? Well, firstly, try to avoid eating too much, and especially avoid eating at all within the hours or few hours before meditation. The tendency after eating is to fall asleep. It isn't wise. You should exercise if you can after sleeping, help the digestive process and not allow it to just settle on your tummy. Walking meditation is a good practice after your meal. But yeah, avoid eating too much. This is what leads to tiredness. That's the first thing. Secondly, get enough sleep. If you're not having enough sleep for your needs, so if you're a working person, you probably need more sleep than, say, a monk who's practicing meditation all the time. We require very little sleep. Meditation in itself is very restorative, more so than sleep. If you are developing samadhi, you are practicing meditation and becoming absorbed, secluded from a lot of the bodily feelings and mental functionality, and having a very refreshing experience of this samadhi practice. And then finally, practicing mindfulness throughout all of your daily activities. So when you woke up this morning, what was the first thing you thought about? What was the first thing you did? Try to make that breathing in, noticing the first breath as you wake each morning, and then continue that theme throughout the day whenever given the opportunity, in any moment, little micro meditation moments throughout the day, stopping for a moment, breathing in, observing that breath, and breathing out is a moment of mindfulness. If you keep developing this, then tiredness, lethargy won't affect your sitting meditation so much, and eventually not at all. Hi Bante, congratulate. Blah, 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 blah. Why do you think restlessness and worry? Oh, a coincidence there. This is the next of the 5 hindrances. Why do you think restlessness and worry are coupled together in the hindrances? I watched a quite... Yes, okay. So, it's again like sloth and torpor. It's really a language thing. We have to use words to try and get a message across. The problem with using words to get a message across, and why it's encouraged that you practice and see for yourself rather than reading copious amounts of text or listening to too much, especially differing opinions, but to experience it for yourself, then you can really see clearly what is actually happening. So we just should look at all these words as a guide and take all the different translations, the common denominators, as about roughly the essence of what the Buddha was actually, the direction the Buddha was pointing us in with regards to this practice. So restlessness and worry are coupled together really is referring to restlessness and wanting to know what's happening next and get on with the future, so thinking about the future. And worry is usually worry about what's happened in the past. So I usually don't say much about restlessness and worry, the words themselves. I but say that the hindrance that is observable and is called restlessness and worry, and why they're coupled together, is thinking about the past and thinking about the future. So worrying about the past, which cannot be changed. It's happened, it's been and gone, it's done. So leave it where it belongs. It doesn't belong anywhere, it's finished, it's gone in the past. And the future, there's no point imagining it, it's only imagination, the future. We don't know what will happen next. 20 years ago, this time, on this day, people sitting in this very spot had no inclination of what would be happening next. And we all know 20 years later what happened. So can we be sure about the future? No. So don't worry about it, don't think about it. This is where restlessness comes from. When you know that, you no longer have the hindrances of restlessness, which is the physical feeling, the physical effect of thinking about the past and the future, and you no longer have worry, which is the mental emotion effect of thinking about the past and the future. So that's why they're coupled together. But it's a bit like asking, why do they say sloth and torpor? I mean, sloth is some lazy kind of furry animal, and torpor is a very ancient English word that refers to tiredness or strained, stressed, worn out kind of feeling. Okay. I have an urgent question. Okay. My desire is to be rid of greed, hatred, and delusion. As you have explained, is the cause of suffering. My dilemma is that I am in a circumstance where I have no choice but to live with a family member who is a cruel alcoholic. Every day, despite my effort in meditation and the Dharma, I suffer terribly with my hatred towards this person. I feel I'm trapped with, hatred towards this person I feel I'm trapped with. Please advise. So I know I skipped through the thank yous and the fact you listen to all my talks, and I appreciate and I read all those bits. I just don't read those out online, but these questions and comments have these very nice and encouraging introductions. So I try to just not list all of those and your other appreciative comments and kind words of encouragement, to just deal with the content matter here. So that's what I'm doing, but I appreciate that, thank you. So yes, your practice in general is correct. We are aiming to reduce greed, hatred and delusion through meditation, through keeping the precepts firstly, but then through the meditation and developing wisdom, as I spoke of yesterday. We're conditioning the mind. We're conditioning the mind towards developing the Brahma Viharas of metta, loving kindness, and metta, loving kindness, along with karuna, compassion. When those qualities are developed by the conditioning of the mind, the citta, then hatred has really no room. It is hard to feel hatred for someone. Now, in your case, you're living with someone whom is difficult, I very much understand, to live with. I don't know your particular circumstances, but if you could have a choice not to live with that particular person, then that would be the obvious choice. But I'm rather assuming that this isn't an option that's open to you. There is to some extent a need to have karuna, compassion, for this person whom is suffering through their addiction to alcohol, in this case, but through ignorance, having delusion, ignorance. Not delusion, that is a lack of understanding, but purely ignorance, avijja, not having really any idea as a result of intoxicants. This is really why the fifth precept is so important, but as a result of intoxicants, the harm they're doing to themselves. They're not probably, as alcoholics, even enjoying the process of drinking and taking the alcohol as they did once in their lives, but trying to get that situation back again. So they are suffering. So you should have some compassion, not should have. Try and develop compassion for how they are feeling. Everything they're doing and saying. Now, if they're physically harming you in any way, then you need to get out of that situation and speak to, I don't know where you are, but speak to the necessary authorities and try and get this individual some help. Because if you're living in a family environment, as you say, there are others also whom are being affected by this behavior. So please, take the practical approach. The Buddha in Buddhism isn't saying we sit around ignoring things, going on, looking at everything and loving everybody in peace and harmony. He's saying take action to avoid harmful situations. Firstly, be kind to yourself. And if this is possible, and to the rest of your family, that's what you do. Now, if that action is to get this person some help, medical assistance or psychological assistance, medical assistance, I should think, first and foremost, then that is probably what you need to do. Then you can go about continuing with your practice of keeping precepts, meditation, samadhi, and developing wisdom, less hindered. But we are never free from these hindrances. There are always going to be external factors. Whether or not your family member is suffering, as you describe here, this particular case with an alcoholic whom is being cruel, then it could be something else. It could be you're in just a very noisy environment, or you could be in an uncomfortable environment, or you may have to work very hard using your thinking brain all of the time just to pay the bills. So not always are we afforded the opportunity to just sit and practice. But this is a lesson in itself. This is a teacher, a time when we can see the desire arising. You mentioned you have this desire to get rid of greed, hatred, and delusion. Now that is taking the nature of chanda, wholesome desire, and turning it into what is tanha, unwholesome desire, thirst or craving for being free from greed, hatred, and delusion. Now the Buddha doesn't suggest we do that, but suggests we practice sila, samadhi, panya in order for over a long time to gradually erode and eradicate greed, hatred, and delusion through the practice. We take action in the present moment with relation to our actions of body, speech, and mind in all that we do mindfully throughout all of our daily activities, to develop the skills of mindfulness, to develop the skills of samadhi, and then ultimately develop these qualities, these four Brahma Viharas they're referred to, or these heavenly qualities of loving kindness, compassion, joy for others, and equanimity within ourselves through the practice. We don't just thirst for them, crave for them, desire them. This is desire. This is the cause of suffering. We practice to either eradicate those causes of suffering or gain those causes of happiness and contentment, those Brahma Viharas. It's the practice we do. You may be well placed to put this into practice. Your loving kindness and compassion could go some way towards helping this individual whom is suffering. But it is not your fault that they are suffering. It is their own actions, their own karma that has led to this current state they're in. So you can do as much as you can to assist and to help. But if it's verbal abuse, if it's what people are saying or sounds they're making even, or ways they're behaving, this is where you can practice equanimity. It needn't affect you. It is just words. It is just hearing. You're just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and then thinking about it, and either in that process of thinking, creating a problem, an additional problem for yourself, or equanimously, with upekkha, equanimity, just accepting that that is the way it is. It is just that. This individual is suffering. So in summary, primarily, despite your efforts in meditation and the Dharma, you suffer terribly with your hatred towards this person, because you're thinking that immediately your efforts of meditation will completely eradicate greed, hatred and delusion, because you have this desire to eradicate greed, hatred and delusion, which isn't unwholesome in itself. It's just the way you're approaching recognizing greed, hatred and delusion. See it as in greed or hatred, emotions, feelings that arise, bring it into the body, the physical feeling of dislike, hatred, aversion to what is going on in your life, and know that that is occurring in this present moment, here and now. Isolate it, put a circle around it, ring fence it as a bodily experience in the present moment, and breathe in. Take that little micro moment of meditation, breathing in, to realize and understand that this is impermanent. It is just something that's stimulated this feeling through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or something you've thought about in relation to that sensory perception, and created a whole new layer of problems. Let it go, let it be, let it just be as it was, undisturbed, and continue with your practice as best you can, or assist as best you can to alleviate the suffering of that other individual. But don't put yourself in harm's way. If you can, avoid the situation, find a quiet space in your home, or go out of your home and find an alternative location for your practice. This is what you can do. This is what the Buddha suggests in all of the suttas when we're dealing with the hindrances. After all, this is just another one of the 5 hindrances we're looking at to come to terms with, come to understand and see what the antidote to it is. You're not wanting this to be the situation. So this is a feeling of aversion. This is the second of the 5 hindrances. The antidote to that is to see the nature of impermanence. Now it may seem that this has been going on forever and will continue forever, but it's actually within your lifespan, a very short time, that this has been your experience. You may say, all my life that this person's been a cruel alcoholic. This may be, but it won't continue necessarily. We don't know what will be happening tomorrow, or even in the next hour, minute or moment. We cannot predict. Everything, all conditioned things are impermanent and unsatisfactory, but out of your control. Sit and practice if you can. If you can't, get up, go elsewhere, but get external help if it's available to you, if necessary. Okay. just to finish off there, I'm trapped with, please advise. Now, you'd need to maybe send me an email, elaborate on that if you'd like further assistance. Because it shouldn't be anyone who's actually trapped in where they're living and whom they're living with. There is help at hand or available. So if someone is harming you, being cruel in that sense, just to repeat what I said earlier, find assistance externally, but without more background information, which appreciably you're not going to want to share there on this public, within this public arena. But do bear in mind, for this is for everybody, there is an email address in the channel description, and those I reply to personally and are not discussed here on this platform. So that is private, that is between you and I only, and you can elaborate with a little more detail in that situation confidentially. Okay, let's have a little look what this dog's problem is this morning. So the dog's now started this howling thing, which is always more of a concern than the barking. The barking we can understand is just strangers walking by. The howling is usually when there's a snake that it can't get away from, or something like that. But there's no snake out there. In fact, I think he's just been abandoned for the day, maybe. Anyway, we'll carry on. Oh, he started again. I don't think it's as distracting, hopefully, for you listeners as it is for me, which is very loud in here. So I think the Buddha formed the Sangha to spread his teachings to all humans in today's world. If everybody became a monk, who would support them? And therefore, it's better to have a life in normal civil life and practice the Sila, Panya and Samadhi. You say Shila, Prajna and Samadhi, I don't know about that, as Sila, Samadhi, Panya, or Sila, Panya, Samadhi, as best as possible in society. Well, this is what the Buddha gave, those different options, to become a monk or a nun, or to be a layman or a laywoman, knowing full well that not everybody would want to ordain and become a monk. You clearly do not want to ordain and become a monk, from what you're saying. I don't think you're not ordaining out of altruism for the whole world, that you feel you need to be a part of society for it to continue. You're just not wanting to do it, and that's perfectly acceptable and understood, which is why this practice and Buddhism is so encompassing, all-encompassing, of both lay practitioners and monastics. It is in fact incumbent on monastics to be a part of society. I have to go every day. I say I have to go, I do. It's my duty, it's in my rules. Every day walking into the village and then the town and back again to receive food. Not just to receive the food, but to give the opportunity to lay practitioners to offer dana, to practice generosity, and also as a reminder of the Sangha's presence in this modern day world and back then in the time of the Buddha. So people don't forget about Buddhism. So it all works very well in harmony. In fact, the Buddha said there are the fourfold assembly is Buddhist monks, Buddhist nuns, Buddhist lay practitioners, men and lay practicing ladies are like the four legs of a table. For it to the Buddha Sasana, the religion, to remain stable, you need all four chair legs or table legs, posts, supports in place. But the fact of the matter, if everybody became a celibate monk, then civilization would die out. But the Buddha knows very well that that wouldn't happen, as do you, as does everybody, because not even everybody is Buddhist. And not all the people that support Buddhist monks are necessarily Buddhists either. They just see someone or people doing good work, or at least practicing the life, the renunciant life, towards not doing any harm, but developing the mind and being able to share that experience with others and benefit them also in their lay lives. So they're willing to support also. So there's no worry, it works very well. And the evidence of that is 2,568 years later, the Buddha Sasana, the religion, is still very much in existence and thriving, as is the Sangha, the group of monks and nuns, and lay practitioners all around the world, men and ladies, very much surviving strong and unchanged today. So if you were to exclude the Sangha and just everybody practice Sila, Samadhi, Panya in lay life, then there would be only people on 5 precepts, so no renunciants, no development of the quality of nekama is the Pali word. Now, the point of nekama, renunciation, is to demonstrate, to show others by example that we do not necessarily need all that we crave. We can live very simple lives and gain absolute contentment and happiness, like I am doing here in this very simple life and simple existence with very little indeed, but very content and very happy, without all of the accoutrements of civilized modern life, without the nice cars, the comfortable houses and air conditionings and sofas and luxurious beds, jewelry and clothing and fine things. None of this that I might have had once before do I have now. I've given it all up. I've renounced that worldly life, that existence, for my own benefit, but in the hopes also that it does show, now I understand, does show others that there is an alternative. Now, it's not to say that they need to ordain also, but they can see that a lot of what they desire is just wanting as opposed to needing. And that is the important basis between having all 4 supports of this practice, this philosophy, this Buddhist religion, with monastics and lay people. Given it is unlikely to have come into existence, then focusing on nothing may increase our luck, so not so unlucky next time around. Okay, so karma is not really anything to do with luck. Luck isn't a word in Buddhism. I think being blessed with good fortune is Siddhi Mangala in Pali, blessed with good fortune. But really, karma is the word we have. So knowing that all our actions will have results. So as given it is unlikely to have come into this existence, is unlucky to have come into this existence, is not a given at all. You have come into this existence, you are here now as a result of rebirth, causes and conditions put in place. No luck involved. The practice is not about developing luck or not luck, or relying on luck, or even hope. The practice is about developing our sila, our behavior, moral virtue, and practicing meditation, not getting lucky. We're in fact abandoning all such notions. Okay. So I have been blamed for things I didn't do at work on several occasions, and I think the reason for it is political. After some experience of this, I have found that the only way to not fall out with the employer and lose the job is to simply say, oh, something happened to the... See, if I get long... I appreciate this has to be long, it's fine, but I'm not very good at managing them. So I found that the only way not to fall out with the employer and lose the job is to simply say, I am sorry for the mistake I made, and not fall in I made, is to say, I am sorry for the mistake I made, and not to fall into the trap to try and defend oneself. And there is a proverb, Chinese proverb, I think, which goes something like this: if you don't agree with your enemy, then they will continue to control you. There but for the grace of God go I. Okay, so, well, I think you have the right approach then, perhaps, yes. Don't fall into this trap of trying to defend yourself when you already know. It's going to get you nowhere. But I would also add to this, you really shouldn't be apologizing for, and in this, your words, I am sorry for the mistake I made, if you did not make that mistake. That is actually lying, and isn't going to help your employer, because you might determine, you might have never made that mistake, and you might never make that mistake again, but the person who did will continue to do it. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way you defend yourself, because you're quite right, that will just create more problems, or even point them in a different direction. But just say nothing and accept the admonishment is the answer. And you can turn it around if you have to have some form of apology by saying that you are sorry, or I am sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry that this has happened and this is the result of what has happened, even going into as much detail as you can. But don't take responsibility when it is not your responsibility. That is only, again, adding fuel to the fire. Because you're creating a problem to arise in the future, because something serious might happen, someone might get hurt as a result of someone else's mistakes that could have been prevented, but for your lying, saying it was your fault and you're sorry, it's quite acceptable for your employer to walk away thinking, I've dealt with that won't happen again, that person's apologised. So don't confuse the issue. That proverb to some extent makes sense, yes, but that's not what it's saying. So be honest with yourself, be honest with your employer, take the admonishment if necessary to keep your job. If it's not appropriate, to advise them accordingly and explain that it's other than what they're seeing is the truth. But don't be a doormat. Don't let people walk over you. The Buddha doesn't say that. Buddhism doesn't say that. Like I was saying earlier, we have to look after ourselves, protect ourselves. But if part of that protection is keeping your job and acquiescing to this admonishment, then, needs must. But don't apologize for something you haven't done. That really is wrong for everybody concerned. So, being concentrated, even upon a violent video game, must become useful when trying to concentrate within meditation or when listening to one's teacher, etc. Practicing concentration in any form, even in a less wholesome way, must be of benefit. No? ? Watching violent video games would not be considered best practice, but there's always a silver lining and a transformation from dark to light if one has the eyes to see the benefit in all things. So a seemingly wise statement, but yes, I could go on with that endlessly. I go around the countryside, sharpening my focus, aiming my gun, shooting everything in sight. It's developing concentration. The point of the Noble Eightfold Path, everything is prefixed with sama, right concentration, sama samadhi, samasati, right mindfulness, sama, right, as opposed to wrong. So, yeah, I think you've probably got the skills there to be single-mindedly concentrated. I know nothing about computer games. My most up-to-date experience of such things would be, I think, Tetris on one of the children's Game Boys. So that's how long ago it is since I sat in front of anything of such of that nature. But I would imagine they're a little more advanced, and you've got things coming at you from all directions, distractions, and you're concentrating on something. But also they might be, to keep your attention, trying to get you to be multitasking in order to survive or to get somewhere, attain a goal. Multitasking is not the objective of Sama Samadhi. Multitasking is a life skill, yes, but for samsara and leading towards rebirth, to satisfy craving and desire. But Sama Samadhi is single-pointed focus on just one thing, doing one thing at a time, not multitasking, and acceptance of that, being content with that. This is where the tranquility, the peace and calm comes from. So you're settling down. And then, if you're used to playing these computer games, your mind will be going all over the place. Now, I don't need to try and convince you. You're trying to convince yourself to go on playing your computer games is okay. Actually, morally, what's wrong with it? If you want to play computer games, play computer games. If people want to go to the pub drinking, they can go to the pub drinking. Or to the disco dancing, they can go to the disco dancing. But that isn't my problem. That is your problem. If you want to follow the Noble Eightfold Path and develop actual happiness through contentment that is lasting, is conducive to wholesome mind states, eradicating unwholesome mind states, and ultimately eradicating greed, hatred and delusion, we have to maintain sila in body, speech and mind. So if we're exposing ourselves to continued violence, however artificial it is, you are still exposing the mind. It isn't developing equanimity. It isn't developing joy, compassion, or loving kindness. It is developing skills to fight off aggressors, or to go hunting, or just to compete. Even competitiveness, competition in the nature of sports, which again is by far from unwholesome in society. But as far as Buddhist practice is concerned, and that is all I'm talking about, it is unwholesome. It is not appropriate. Monks are prohibited from participating in sporting events of any kind of a competitive nature. Now, you may say there are some martial arts or something like that, but really very much that is restricted to certain areas of Buddhist practice that has come as a result many generations later from the original teachings of the Buddhism. As far as any sort of physical exertion, exercise goes within meditation, they are more yogic practices, Tai Chi or Qigong, something like this. No real combat. And even with Shaolin martial arts practices, they are based on self-defense, not attack. And defense is firstly described as being the best form of defense is to run away, to get out of any adversary situations, like I was saying earlier, to protect oneself. And at the very last resort, use the very minimal force to protect yourself without harming others. But you can justify all kinds of things to yourself, and that's okay. But it isn't necessary to try and convince yourself that if computer games were around at the time of the Buddha, then he would have said that they're okay because they develop concentration, because he wouldn't. Because there were other skills that people were developing, archery, hunting, sort of gladiatorial skills even, in the time of the Buddha, warfare skills, and all kinds of practices that people competitively were taking part in that were similarly to the modern day computer game arena available then, that the Buddha discouraged his Sangha, his monks and nuns from participating in. So I'm just going to, this is a long question, so I'm going to cut it quite down a lot. Theravada is a kind of lesser, Theravada is kinda lesser in the amount of text to read, I guess, because Tibetan Buddhism has tanka art with all of the blah blah, and then it goes on about the different aspects of Tibetan Buddhism, which I don't know anything about. But yes, there's a lot there, from Tibetan medicine to tanka art to all of this worship, which you say is not worship, the deities and gods and realms. Yes, indeed. With Theravada, I guess, there can be a lot of freedom. One seems able to go about one's own practice without interference and read and learn whatever one deems to be useful. So, I would say there's quite a lot to read in the Tipitaka. It's, if you put the Tipitaka in book form in front of me here, it wouldn't fit between these walls. Now, appreciably, the Tibetan tradition probably contains that and then some. So yes, there's a lot of doctrinal and cultural additions that have come later, but the core teachings of the Buddha are still there within it. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is a practitioner of Buddhism, essentially, albeit head of whatever in Tibetan tradition. So, yes, but as far as Theravada is concerned, that is what we study. We're not, it says, free and read and learn whatever one deems to be useful. It is deemed that only these texts are useful, the Vinaya Pitaka, the Sutta Pitaka, and not necessarily, but also the Abhidharma. And it isn't deemed even necessary to having read those, but as long as you understand the core teachings of Buddhism, understand the principles we have to know and read and understand, at least from the Vinaya Pitaka, the 227 bhikkhu rules, or 311 bhikkhuni rules if you're a nun. But other than that, we need to just be living the life, practicing. It is within the very strict confines of the Sangha. So no, we're not able to just go and be able to go about one's own practice without interference in that respect. We're part of a either Buddhist community, or if we're living in solitude, we're doing that. We're living alone. There is in Theravada Buddhism no option for a monk to go and live in society alone. So be married or live in a hotel with lots of other people or something like that. Whereas I think in some of the Tibetan traditions there is that option for monks or rinpoches, teachers, to go about in ordinary societal life. We're only allowed to live alone if we're practicing and living in solitude, not with other monks, or we live within a community. So I'd say, it swings and roundabouts. I don't think you can draw such a black and white conclusion as to the differences between Tibetan and Theravada Buddhism, or Theravada Buddhism and any other school of Buddhism tradition, because they are all based on the same core teachings of the Buddha. The 5 principal precepts for lay practitioners, and the many more precepts that there are for ordained practitioners, or the Sangha. So that's being said, then practice of meditation again is as a result of what the Buddha has guided us all and how we practice, and this leads to the development of wisdom. So yeah, the rest of it, like with other traditions, the additional aspects, yogic practices, tantric practices, other gods, realms, and additional cultural influences are the optional extras, I describe them, accessories to the core practice that you can take or leave, that will not, by leaving, preclude you from attaining to enlightenment or becoming free from suffering within this lifetime. So I think on that note, I hope there's something there of some use, and if so, please use it, share it. If not, then let it go and don't let it bother you. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhihotu. The dog's gone very peaceful now. Just the chipmunks to listen to.